Welcome back to the second video in the Getting Started with Swift series. If you watched the first video, then you should have your Xcode development environment up and running. If not, then take a quick look at that first video and that will explain how to do it. As I mentioned in the first video, I'm going to be explaining things from scratch. The first topic I want to cover off on is constants and variables, and leading on from that we'll talk about the different data types in Swift. Okay, well let's start up a playground and get into it. So a constant or variable lets us assign a name to a value of a particular type. The main difference between constants and variables is a constant can't be changed, but a variable can. So if you want to set up a value that should never be changed, then you'd make it a constant. But if you have something that needs to be changed at some point in time, then you would use a variable. We use the let keyword to make a constant, and we use the var keyword to be a variable. So let's try this in a playground now. Okay, so let's start up Xcode. And we had our playground here on the desktop, so let's just open that back up again. Okay, so let's give this a try. Let's make a constant x equal to 10. And just to see if we can or cannot change it, let's try and make x now equal to 12. Okay, now if we run this, we get an error, and it's telling us that it cannot assign to the value x because it's a let constant. And actually, I think if we have a look down the bottom here, it actually even says try changing from let to var to make it mutable, and mutable means changeable. Okay, so it's given us a hint. Let's just change that to var. So now we've got var x equals 10, and then we're going to try and then make x equal to 12. And if we run that again, it now seems quite happy. And if you look over here in the side, you'll see that it's set the value of 10 to x, and then here it's quite happily updated it to 12. As I mentioned, with constants and variables, is they're of a particular type. This allows Swift to know what type of value needs to be saved so it can store it correctly. The way we do this is using a type annotation. We place a colon after the constant or variable name, we leave a space, and then we put the name of the type that we want. So what are the different types? Well, if you wanted to set up something with text in it, you would use a string type. And if you wanted to store a whole number, then you'd use an int or an integer type. And if you wanted to store a decimal number, you could use a floating point type such as a double or a float. There are other types as well, however this is enough to get us started, so let's try it out now. Let's create a variable and let's make it an integer. So integer, and let's just call it integer value, and we put the colon, a space, and then we use int. Now if you notice, it's actually showing a heap of other types here at the moment, like int32, int64, int8, int16. We'll look at them down the track, but they're just the different bit lengths that it actually uses to store the integer value. But as I say, we'll just use int, and we'll make it a value of 10. Okay. Let's create another variable. Let's call it string value, and we'll assign it a type of string. And now to assign string values, we use a double quote, and let's just say hello. And we put another double quote on the end of it, and that's how we specify a string value. And let's create one more. So var, and we'll call it float value, and we'll call it a type of float, and we'll make that 3.14. Okay, so once we've actually set the type of a constant or a variable, we can't put a different type into it. So with that integer value, if we go integer value and we try and make that 10.1, that can't really be done because we've declared it as an integer type, but we're trying to load a float type into it. And you can see that it's actually come up and said, hang on a second, you can't assign the value of a type double to an integer. It's just not allowed. And if we change that to maybe 11, then that's quite valid. 11 is just another integer. It doesn't have any decimal component or anything like that. So it quite happily lets us do that. We can go integer value equals 5 plus 8. 5? 4 plus 8 even. 4 and 8 are both integer types, so it's quite happy to add them together and store that in integer value. And if we run it, we can see that result of 12 has actually been stored in integer value, and it's happy enough to do it. Now, I guess it's the same sort of thing. If we go again, integer value, we go equals, and maybe it's self, and then plus, maybe the float value, and we try and do that, then again, it comes up and says, hang on a second, you can't convert the float to the expected type of integer to add it together. And it's put a little underline under the float to tell us where the actual error is. So it can't do this because they're two different data types. It can't add them together. It can't load them into different variables or anything like that. We have to do things to handle this sort of thing when we need to do it. There's one other thing that I just want to cover off on, and you probably saw it in the previous sort of example that we did, but you don't always have to specify the type. If we go let number of entries, say, and we make it equal to 5, then we haven't specified the type. However, Swift is smart and it looks at the value that you're assigning and says that looks like an integer. So what it does, it makes this constant, no entries, a integer type, and then assigns the variable to it. So this can speed things up. You don't always have to specify the actual type. So Boolean is a type that basically just has two values, true or false. And to specify a Boolean constant or variable, we use the name bool. So if we go var finished, bool equals true, or maybe we go false. And it quite happily accepts that. And the good thing about the Booleans is we can use that to do checks. So we might start something and say, okay, this piece of code's not finished, so we set finished to equal false, and then we do some processing in the algorithm. At some point in time in there, if it does finish working, we actually just change that finished variable to be true, and then we can do a check later on in the code, and that just allows the code to sort of drop out there. So quite handy, and I just wanted to cover that off now because we're going to use this in some upcoming examples. Now the other thing I should just mention is there's a really handy thing here. We can go print. If we open the brackets, and maybe we put the string value inside the brackets. And if we run that whole lot again, then basically you'll see that it will print out the hello. Now we can also print the integer value. And if we do the same thing again, you can see it's still printing the hello, and then it's printing the integer value. And again, if we print float value, and maybe if we print the finished variable as well. So I'll just stop that and run it again. And you'll see that the print will actually print out strings, integers, floats, and booleans, and it quite happily just uses whatever you pass to it. Well, I think I might close off this video here. In the next video, we will look at the basic operators that are available in Swift.
Well, thanks for watching this video. If you like what you've seen, then can I get you to give the video a like? And if you'd like to see more, then hit the subscribe button. and if you hit the chime, you'll get notified of when I put up new videos. Okay, cheers for now.